It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Hope you had yourself a great weekend. You got a little bit refreshed, you relaxed maybe a little bit. Maybe you're full steam trying to get some harvest done if you're out east, or maybe you're doing some late spraying in west. Whatever's going on, I hope you had yourself a great weekend. As I did. Yeah, it was great. We had a bunch of relatives in town, which was a lot of fun, and spent a lot of time at the ballpark as per usual. And it was great. Hard to believe we're going to see the beginning of August here already, and the year is just continuing to fly by. Hey, we're going to talk about agronomics here today. Peter W.P. Johnson will be with us. We're going to talk about all things agronomy across the country. We're also going to hear a Pulse School episode that Kara Oosterhuis of RealAgriculture recorded with Robyne Bowness-Davidson, Alberta Pulse Crop Specialist with Lakeland College. They're going to talk about lupins, and maybe that is a potential future pulse crop to be looked at in some of the acres that are currently taking up some of those pulse acres. And we'll also have time today for the top ag news stories of the day. We got a port worker strike that continues to evolve. Hopefully we have a new deal. We got some economic news out of Canada. We got China talking about deflation. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening, and we'll get to as much of it as we possibly can. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or of course anywhere on social media. We are Real Agriculture on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. Or you can always call that RealAg feedback line. Love your feedback. You can send it to 855-776-6147. You press the number 3. You leave me a message. And you don't need to come on the air or anything. You just leave me a message. 855-776-6147. On Friday's program, we were talking about the legacy of Marie-Claude Bibeau as agriculture minister. And got some feedback here from Phil out of Ontario. A couple notes. So he says, you completely missed in the failure of Bibeau on the Eastern Canadian fertilizer tariffs, not refunded back to farmers. You're right. That was a good point that we missed in terms of how she will be viewed, and that money not being given back. I always said it should have been given back. Of course, they put it into some off-calf programming, and so not even specifically those dollars, just like dollars. So I think that'll be something that'll stick with her. That's a good point. I appreciate that email, Phil. Phil also points out that I don't understand what you mean about environment, health, and agriculture being in Quebec. It didn't seem to add up. So the feedback there, Phil, is there was becoming a lot of criticism in the fact that all three of those portfolios, which are very, becoming more and more connected, were in Quebec, had a lot of Quebec influence, which was really holding up a lot of movement and approvals. And this has to go with MRL reviews, glyphosate, of course, fertilizer emission reduction, front of meat packaging, the warning label, all of those kinds of things. Anyway, a lot of concern amongst farm groups in terms of that sort of triangle, that power triangle that was creating some political issues where maybe there was science not necessarily being adhered to. So that's what that reference from Kelvin was about. Let's take a break. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we'll get started with Agronomic Monday. Peter W.P. Johnson's here right after this.
When it comes to the productivity and efficiency of your operation, every decision counts. One of those decisions is how you fuel your equipment. You need to be sure that it will run efficiently and without unnecessary downtime. Count on Co-op and your local Co-op fuel team to keep your equipment running smoothly with seasonally blended high-quality fuels and premium lubricants with guaranteed performance. We are Western Canadian. We are fueling harvest. We are Co-op.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, fava beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit The Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
This year might bankrupt us. If I lose the farm, I'm letting down generations of my family. Why am I the only one who can't handle it? Maybe the farm would be better off without me. Hello?
Hey, I was just thinking about you and thought I'd say hi. I know it's been a hard season, and I wanted to see how you're holding up.
We might feel alone, but we're all in this together. Visit domore.ag for mental health supports tailored for the agriculture community.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Agronomic Monday. You know, imitator stabilizer products claim dual protection, but do they actually deliver? Defend your UAN from nitrogen loss with Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services, offering superior above and below ground protection. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. Well, let's dig in here. We're talking to Pete Johnson from Real Agriculture. Hey, Pete, how are you doing on this Monday?
I'm doing awesome, thanks, Shaun. Looks like, well, hopefully there's a 40% chance of showers today, but if we miss that, we're going to get like a 3-day window to work at wheat. Oh, wheat harvest has been such a brutal process here, but we're hopeful. We're hopeful that we'll make some good headway, and some guys will get wrapped up, and the people further north will make a big dent in the crop.
Yeah, some of that weather has really challenged some of the quality of that wheat, no?
Oh, quality is really deteriorated fast, Shaun, to the point where some white wheat growers are actually being rejected. They were told, go home, find a bin, put that sprouted soft white in it. We'll try to help you find somewhere to take it for feed. But normally the soft red crop goes into the feed trade. This year, you know, soft white looks like a lot of that soft white is going to end up in the feed trade, which means the soft red now, more of it has to go to milling. And in the soft red crop, in some areas, there's already sprouts there, but low falling number is really what has been catching us. And so in the soft red game, man, if there's up to $50 a ton discounts, and with the markets tanking to boot, it just hurts a whole lot. And the other people that made the right move, they forward contracted milling quality wheat at $12.50 a bushel. They don't have one bushel of milling quality wheat to fill those contracts. They've got wheat, we've got great yields, but quality is a real kick in the butt.
Yeah, you know, weather just once again speaks to that weather timing, right? We get the rain when we need it, when we're in the growing season. It's when we get the rain at harvest that it really can create some problems. Of course, there's this like switch here, right? Well, where we don't want it to rain during wheat harvest, but then we want it to change where it starts to rain during the August for soybeans. But you got to ask yourself, in some of these parts, with the amount of rainfall that has happened in central and eastern Canada, how are those soybeans doing?
Yeah, all the bean crops, Shaun, and I got to be careful because just like Western Canada is massive, people think Ontario agriculture is small, and it is in relative terms, but it still covers a wide geography. So when I go into the more northerly part of southwestern Ontario, I get up into Bruce and Grey counties. They've had just-in-time rains. The beans there look excellent for the most part. That's where we're having trouble with soybean aphids. But man, the bean crop up there looks stellar. You get down into the heart of agriculture, Perth, Huron, Middlesex, Chatham, Kent, Elgin, like that part of the world. Oh my gosh, the beans, I don't know, some people are calling them John Deere beans because there's as much yellow as there is green in them. There's dead beans in big parts of the field. Like it has been a real nightmare. We went from being too dry. I mean, in early June, you and I were talking about it's too dry to plant edible beans. There's no moisture left. And we eventually get them in the ground, and we get some rain on June the 12th, and we think it's too late for the wheat crop because a lot of it had already prematurely given up. And we're getting unbelievable wheat yields at over 150 bushels per acre in a really dry area in the performance trials up near Ripley, Kincardine area. They got a 12 bushel per acre yield response to the T3 fungicide, which it's dry. That's the dry area. How can you get 12 bushel yield response? The average yield from that performance trial is 112 bushels per acre, which is just crazy high for a performance trial in that area. So then it rains, and then it never stops. And so right now it's been just brutally hard to get fungicides on. We think we need fungicides on the soybean crop, the edible bean crop, where the beans are still alive, on the corn crop, and it's just too wet to drive through in many situations. So the weather, Mother Nature has not been all that kind from that perspective.
Yeah, she has a habit of doing that. There is no doubt about that. Hey, on Friday we got the new Saskatchewan crop report, and other end of the spectrum when it comes to the moisture side, we continue to see a pretty sharp decline in some of these Saskatchewan crop conditions. We've seen that in other parts of Western Canada too, as the rains continues to be really, really spotty, and some people are getting it and many are not. It's starting to feel not quite like 2021 on the drought that has stained our brain for still to this day, but we're sure sliding back. We're going the wrong way. It's kind of like the baseball team, where you get off. It's like the Tampa Bay Rays. Off to a lightning start. Things are looking great. I think they broke like the record of a start to a baseball season of like 18 wins or something like that. And now they're second in their own division. So that's Saskatchewan crop conditions right now. This heat and lack of moisture is really wreaking havoc on the quality of this potential crop that's out in that field, Pete.
Yeah, and that's so divergent from what we are here in Ontario. Like, we're actually really getting behind in crop development. We haven't had our normal heat. Like, we should be halfway through fungicides on corn. We're just getting started. And Shaun, I always worry when corn tassels in August because it has a 60-day grain fill window. And if you don't tassel till August, then that means you don't finish grain fill until end of September into October. And that is a risky time of the year to be trying to finish grain fill. And that's exactly where we planted on time. It wasn't nothing that the early season did to beat us up, but it's just been cool. And I wonder, it's been cloudy. There hasn't been much sunshine. I think we got 18 days of rain in July in some locations. And so you know how much cloud cover you get when you get 18 days of rain. And that coupled with smoke, I think cool temperatures, limited sunshine, and the crop development is just really falling behind, and that's never what I like to see. Yeah,
and kind of in both cases, not kind of, but in both cases, when you have adversity, whether it's you're not getting that ideal amount of heat and you got too much water, or you got no water and way too much heat, which kind of tends to be the situation here right now, it's frustration, right? You're more like that because it's just so much of it's out of your control. You can't turn the heat. You're not running a greenhouse, so to speak, and the greenhouses have their own challenges. But in this regard, they have a controlled climate. We're not able to control that climate, and that's the frustration because we see that crop deteriorating right in front of our eyes in either situation. In terms of agronomic technical language, let's put it that way. Is there a name for when we hit that ideal equilibrium of temperature and moisture on a given crop? If you have that really simple sort of chart where those two lines connect, is there a certain name for that?
I think that's called perfection.
Okay. Constantly chasing it is what we are.
Yeah, well, so when I do presentations about wheat, I often ask the question, what is a perfect day in a wheat crop's lifespan? And most growers kind of say, I don't know, but it's actually a 18-degree daytime temperature and a 10-degree or slightly less than 10-degree night. And so there is that, perfect window. With corn, it's much higher optimum temperatures, kind of, 30 Celsius with nice warm nights, maybe 22, 23 Celsius for development. A little cooler nights are better from a photosynthetic standpoint, but you don't want it too cool. And so every crop is different, but I don't know that there is a really, truly scientific term that talks about that other than just optimum growth conditions.
Yeah. And like I said, once again, things out of your control, right? That's the uncomfortable part. And, depending on how many crops you've put in and taken off, you've been through a lot. You've probably been through all of those cycles, which can be super, super frustrating, but it adds to the whole experience. Hey, before we take a break here, Pete, what's going on with corn rootworm in the East?
So we're into the resistant corn rootworm, and I see that they're bringing out RNAi technology now, so that may give us a little bit of a boost. But we can't rely too hard on RNAi technology because we know that it's longevity before the insect develops resistance to it. Looks like it's very short-lived. And what I find really interesting, we talk a lot, Shaun, you and I, about herbicide drift and keeping that herbicide at home, and in particular with dicamba because how impactful it is on soybeans. And we now have rootworm, so we should be able to grow second-year corn without resistant rootworm being a problem in our own fields because of how the rootworm biology life cycle works. Where we are seeing an issue is when the neighbor has continuous corn and has all sorts of resistant rootworm larvae and adults in their field, and they are now, we could almost call it drifting into our second-year corn that theoretically shouldn't be at risk, but because they drift into our second-year corn, guess what? We have massive rootworm issues in second-year corn that we did not expect. And if it was a herbicide, we'd be calling that neighbor up and saying, hey, you drifted on my crop, man, you got to pay. We're not so sure we can do that with the resistant rootworm, but it's a definite concern.
Shoot. Hey, Pete, we got to take a break. We'll be back with more here on Agronomic Monday on RealAg Radio right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. Shaun Haney, your host, joined by Peter E.P. Johnson of Real Agriculture. Hey, this segment's brought to you by Granubor from U.S. Borax. Make sure you ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Pete, last week we were talking about fungicide on corn on Thursday's show on the Farmer Rapid Fire, and I wanted to bring it up with you. What is your thoughts on in terms of using fungicide on corn in a silage situation? Do you see a lot of benefits from that?
Yeah. So if you look at the work that John Winchell has done, he's an agronomist with I forget which nutrition company out of the U.S. and he covers Ontario as well. But he's really done some amazing work. And in field corn and grain corn, we always talk about it's dawn. Oh, we may talk a little bit about zearalenone when we get into the pig hog industry, but it's like it's just dawn. That's all. Man, you get into silage corn, and it is a toxin complex. It's not just the dawn in the feed, and we thought that feeding ruminants some of these toxins they could tolerate more, and they can, but it does impact their performance. And John, we had a great Twitter discussion around fungicides on corn and timing and some new work from Dr. Dave Hooker and Dr. Art Shasma, Ridgetown Campus University of Guelph. But John kind of came back and said, look, in silage, man, it's not just about controlling dawn at silk timing. It's about how much toxin do we actually create, the entire toxin complex in the plant, and in particular through the later growth stages as we're accumulating more of that dry matter. So kind of the last 15, 30 days before we take that silage off. And in his work, man, if you delay silage harvest, if you get taken out of the field because of too much water, the amount those toxins increase is absolutely phenomenal. Like, it just blow your brains how they will increase through that late September, early October time frame. And so, yeah, I think when it comes to silage corn, that fungicides are a much more beneficial play than they are for a cash crop farmer.
Interesting. Now, how worried should we be, or how concerned are you about, like we challenged with herbicide resistance? How big of a concern is fungicide resistance on different crops? Like I think of some of the pulse crops like chickpeas, we're using fungicides quite a bit, but relatively speaking, just to keep this all make sure we're in the right frame of mind here, compared to a fruit and veg rotation, we're definitely doing less. But what's your thoughts on fungicide resistance?
So, Shaun, at the end of the day, it's not if we will get fungicide resistance, it's when it will happen. And you just can't repeatedly put selection pressure on any organism, whether it's a fungicide, a bacteria, a human, or, a rabbit, whatever. You continue to put selection pressure on them, and there are going to be individuals within that genetic diverse base that can tolerate that better, and they will generate more offspring, and suddenly we have resistance. So I think resistance management simply has to be top of mind all the time. With my growers, when we do white mold control, it's kind of like, no, I know that Allegro is probably the best product for white mold control in edible beans, but I do not like using it twice. We're going to use Allegro once, and we're going to use ProPulse for the second pass, or we're going to use something else for that second pass, just to avoid that resistance issue. So I think we've been very fortunate in many of our field crops that we haven't seen more resistance develop. And that's predominantly because we only tend to use them once per season. But even only using them once per season, we are seeing a lot of resistance start to show up in some of the soybean diseases. Frog eye leaf spot is resistant now. And so it's just a matter of time. That's the reality.
Oh, that'd be losing a pretty important tool, right? Like
huge.
Yeah, like huge. Man,
it's a bit. No, so Shaun, it's the same thing as when we got the first glyphosate tolerant weeds. And I mean, glyphosate is still a tool, but man, that happened because we did not use good stewardship with glyphosate. If you go way back, I can remember some of the salespeople, the sales force for glyphosate saying, we'll never develop resistance to glyphosate. man, anybody tells you that about any product, just say, I don't believe you, because, man, biology on this earth has been here for a long time, and every species wants to survive, and you put selection pressure on them, it's going to happen. So the onus comes back to the grower, and I think it was Andrew Niss at YO Weeds on Twitter that said it the best. He said, your herbicide program worked really good this year. Use something different next year.
Right.
Because if you keep using that same program, we're going to get resistant.
And at the same time, you and I, during the commercial break there, you were sharing a story about some misinformation out there about some of the foliar fungicides. So we got to make sure that not only are we keeping in mind how and when we're using these products, but also make sure we're taking the information from the right sources as we're making some of those decisions.
Absolutely. So there was a tweet put out, a Twitter thread, talking about foliar fungicides in soybeans, and that if you sprayed a foliar fungicide on your soybeans, that the nodules that fix the nitrogen for that soybean crop would stop working. And there was a picture, and maybe in that particular instance, something weird happened. I'm not saying that individual didn't see that occur. But first off, it's a fungicide, and Rhizobium is a bacteria. Fungicides very rarely have impact on bacteria. And second of all, if that actually happened on a regularly consistent basis, it'd be all over in the science, and we would get less soybean yield from applying fungicides, not more soybean yield. And so critical thinking, Shaun, whenever you see something that doesn't sound right, put your critical thinking skills to the test and think through it logically. Think about the science. This is one of the things that I always challenge when I speak at a university class or soil and crop group or whatever. You're here to learn critical thinking skills, and in those situations, that's what you need to apply.
My mom used to say, put your thinking cap on.
Yep, absolutely. Don't just believe it because Wheat Pete says it. Man, even Wheat Pete can be wrong. It is wrong lots. So put your thinking cap on and think it through.
It is kind of a challenge, though, right? Like, I don't know how many times my wife and I play this game where she's like, did you hear about it? I'm like, yeah, where did you hear that? And then you got to kind of, I don't know where I read it. I saw it somewhere. Oh man, look, it's this website that isn't really a real website. Like, it's becoming more and more of a challenge. This is like, we can make fun of it, but it's not easy sometimes too.
No, it's definitely not easy. And the frustrating part to me, Shaun, is that you spend so much time and resources debunking the myths. And it's easy to start a myth. It's so much harder to change someone's thought process once they've bought into the myth. And so it is very frustrating, because I have enough trouble just trying to extend the good new science, like the stuff around corn fungicides with Dave Hooker and Art Shasma. Man, people need to look at that, because that's new information, and it actually has an impact on our management today. Meanwhile, I'm spending time trying to say, no, that's not right. And it eats up resources like crazy. It drives me nuts.
It's why extension exists, though, to be fair.
Yeah. Okay. But dang it, extension is tough enough just getting the good new information and the old solid information that people have forgotten out there, that spending time debunking those myths, I just wish the myths wouldn't get started.
Okay, but myth can come, and maybe not a true myth, but something in that vertical that they can eventually become true. Like, right? Like, is where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe it's not the myth. Maybe it's just maybe saying it's a myth is too harsh. Maybe it's, in some cases, maybe it's some contrarian thinking. Right? Challenging some of the way that people have been doing things.
Right. And that's absolutely fair. And almost everything has some tidbit of truth at the center of it. But in this particular case, it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. If the nodules quit working, we'd get less yield. It's just out there a long way that's a little bit hard to understand.
Well, this week is the first few days of August, which is crazy. I cannot believe how fast this growing season has gone. What's your biggest surprise so far this year in the 23 growing season?
So my biggest surprise this year, Shaun, has been how high our wheat yields are. Like I mean, the old adage is that dry weather will scare you to death, wet weather will starve you to death. We were so dry through grain fill, lots of areas with almost no moisture, and we do have some very low yields, like some sandy knolls where the wheat is at 30 bushels per acre. But man, we have field averages over 150 bushels per acre. Had a great email discussion with Mark Sultanfest. He's an agronomist from Delmarva, so that's Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. And they got yields 30 bushel per acre higher than they've ever gotten before. And he was just trying to understand how they got there. And we're sort of in that same game here in Ontario, where that's been the biggest surprise. I expected that wheat would be, okay, average. Maybe we could squeak a bushel or two above average. There's farmers setting record yields. Not everybody, because where it was too dry, it really was too dry. But there's way more high yields out there than I ever expected. And that just shows me that when you get more days of grain fill, that really trumps a lot of the other parameters that we look at. Days of grain fill count. Now, still have to have, base moisture. You have to have good soil moisture. You have to have moisture from somewhere. But where you have that good water holding capacity, you get more days of grain fill, you get more yield. Full stop.
I would say, I don't know if I have a biggest surprise. I think it's more of a disappointment that there were some acres that really started off well in Western Canada, like I was alluding to those Saskatchewan crop conditions, and with the weather pattern change, La Nina and La Nina, I was hoping for a little bit of a move away from having to talk about drought all the time. And there are areas that have reversed course, especially in the western half of the U.S. and parts of Western Canada. But the disappointment is we're still talking about drought, and it feels like it's kind of getting old. Not just for me that talks about it, but for the growers that have to go through it. I would really like a reverse there for sure. Hey, Pete, thank you so much for joining us here today on Agronomic Monday. All the best to you this week. Happy scouting, and get that wheat crop off, okay?
Thanks, man. You have yourself a great week as well, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
We'll be back here on RealAg Radio right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. The Canadian Beef Industry Conference is happening at the BMO Centre on Stampede Park in Calgary, Alberta from August 15th through the 17th. I'm going to be there. We're doing a live recording of RealAg Radio. Looking forward to that. You should be there too. You can find out more and to register by going to CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details. And like I said, to register there as well. Great lineup of speakers. Brian Burke is one of the speakers, I believe, at the event. Looking forward to that. Going to interview him. And it's good. I love beef meetings. It's a good old time. The food is always so good. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about lupins. Now, I have to admit, I have heard of lupins, don't know very much at all about growing them. Could there be a potential for lupins, and does that solve some other problems that we have on the prairies? Well, Kara Oosterhuis of Real Agriculture digs into the issue with Robyne Bowness-Davidson, Alberta Pulse Crop Specialist with Lakeland College. Here's Kara and Robyne.
Welcome to Real Agriculture's Pulse School Series. I'm Kara Oosterhuis. I have here with me today Robyne Bowness-Davidson, who is with Lakeland College. How's it going today?
Good. Great day for a field tour.
Absolutely. So we are here today talking about lupins. Now, do you want to tell me what are lupins?
Lupins are new to us new to us pulse crop. They are a crop that we have kind of looked over the fence to Europe and Australia and seen that they're having quite a bit of success with this new crop called lupins. And so we've decided to give them a try in Canada. We've been playing around with them for quite a while, trying to figure them out, bringing over new varieties and things like that. So we're pretty excited about the potential.
So there's two different main varieties you look at, correct?
Yeah, we look at two types. There is a number of types, but the two that we're focusing on are narrow-leaf blue lupin and white lupin. So they are a very similar plant in their agronomic packages, but they have some significant differences in the characteristics of the plant and maturity issues and things like that.
And one of the big things I know you're highlighting when it comes to lupins is protein content, and it's quite a bit higher than other pulse crops, correct?
Yeah, field pea comes in somewhere around 20 to 25, Kara, and then we jump up to faba beans, which will take us probably from about 28 to 32-ish. And then we have lupins that start at that 32 and can go as high as 40.
So with that high protein content, it's mostly for the feed market, or what sort of markets we're looking at here?
Well, I would say that the main market that lupins are going for kind of around the world is for the animal feed market. They are seen as a very nice alternative to soybean. So especially in Western Canada, where soybean is an issue, especially in Saskatchewan and in Alberta to grow them, lupin might have a better fit that way. So animal feed for sure, but there's also a lot of work going into fractionation and using them in food products. So there's a lot of non-dairy based products or alternatives that lupins are being used for. So you see a lot of that. Yeah, you see a lot of that when you look into the feed market. And fractionation as well. They're trying to use the lupin protein and sneak it into our foods.
Now, domestically marketability, or is this all for the foreign market that we would sell to?
Up until recently, it's been a foreign market. It's been trying to ship them down to Asia, over to Europe, and in areas like that. But we are currently developing a domestic market. We're working with a company called Lupin Platform Inc. That is doing contracted acres across Alberta, and that is giving us what we haven't had for a long time, and that's a market, a way to sell them, a way to put farmers money in their pockets and actually make money off these things. So, yeah.
Now, I mean, of course, we're always looking for different crops to add to the rotation, but what's another big reason that farmers should be considering lupins maybe?
Well, one of the things that I'm excited about with lupins is because we have some diseases coming in, the dreaded aphanomyces that people are hearing a lot about, that is affecting our peas and lentils. And of course, if you look at the acreage across Western Canada, that pretty much is it. Most of it is peas and lentils. So if we have the ability to bring lupins into the rotation, then I have the ability as a pulse researcher to give these farmers another protein crop that they can keep in their rotation. So another pulse crop to keep in their rotations so that we don't have to lose that the benefits of a pulse crop. So.
And in any of your trials, have you seen any insect troubles?
Well, right now the pests in general are pretty low. We do see a little bit of blister beetle. That's a new one to us. It shows up. It's mostly in southern Alberta, but we're starting to see it more, especially after a couple dry years. They're showing up quite a bit. But as far as insect pressure as a whole, very, very little. And that would extend to diseases as well. I already mentioned aphanomyces and them being resistant to that, but we haven't really any major root diseases that are really affecting it either. We do know that fusarium can be a little bit of an issue, and we've seen that, but we also have some really successful fungicide products that we can use as seed treatments that are helping alleviate that. And so in the research that we've done, it doesn't really matter which seed treatment you choose. Just choose one, put it on, and the lupins seem to be pretty happy.
So speaking of dry, though, what kind of climate are we looking at here? What do they like to be grown in?
Well, they're moisture loving. Okay, so they're not going to be an answer for drought. Definitely not. They do like quite a bit of moisture. They have a fairly significant taproot on them, Kara, so they're not going to do well in really light sandy soils where they're not getting a lot of moisture. So I would say central Alberta, the Highway 2 corridor, perfect, or in areas of Saskatchewan where we have on the eastern side, where they have more moisture. They'll do better.
Okay,
sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kara. It's good to talk to you.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BSF Canada. Make sure you go to PulseSchool.com to find all of our great on-demand videos, all related to pulse agronomy. So if you're growing, lupins, maybe chickpeas, field peas, lentils, and the like, you can definitely go to PulseSchool.com and find all of our great agronomic content dedicated to those crops. And I don't care if you're in Western Canada or south of the border as well. Lots of great stuff and agronomic extension information for you to consume and make better decisions out in the field. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get to the top ag news stories today. It looks like we may have an end to the labor impasse at the BC port with that strike and threatening of a strike and all of that potential disruption. We'll get the deets when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
It's now time on RealAg Radio for the top ag news stories of the day. Power through harvest with co-op fuels and lubricants made for the longest days and biggest equipment. Performance you can rely on. That is co-op fuels. Okay, let's get to the top ag news stories of the day. There's lots to discuss here. Lots happening. Brutal day in the markets today. Red everywhere. I think it's a good example of how, over the weekend, I saw a lot of tweets about, escalating issues in Ukraine. I believe there was some export infrastructure that did have some fighting around it. And I saw people arguing whether or not it will have impact on exports or not. Really, there's so much fluidity to what's happening over there, and not all of us are geographical experts on the region. And so I saw tweets yesterday, people saying, the market is going to be up huge on Monday. It's been the reverse. It's down considerably. At the time of recording today's show, it's pretty red. Corn, soybeans, canola even down $23. Seeing Dees corn down 21 to 509 and a quarter. Soybeans down in September, down 70 to 1362 and 3/4, down 70 and a quarter. So definitely a challenging day today in the markets. And once again, there's a lot of risk premium here right now. And we heard this from Ted Seaford last week, right? There is risk in both directions. So today definitely proving to be one of those challenging days for sure in the market. So stay on top of it, everybody. Okay, port worker strike. We got a bit of an update here. The union representing BC port workers has reached a tentative agreement with employers, averting another strike while capping a month of wild swings in industrial relations. So both sides recommended late Sunday that their members accept the negotiated settlement just hours after the union criticized employers for refusing to budge on some of the major sticking points. This feels like it's been an on-again, off-again kind of relationship. Just 17 days ago, there was an announcement of the tentative deal, and both sides approved and recommended acceptance of a separate proposed collective agreement that had been drafted by a federal mediator. So what's different? Well, in this case, they've come to terms without the mediator. On the weekend, Labor Minister Seamus O'Regan talked about, looking at, forcing this to just happen. So, even the Liberal government has looked at this and sort of said, well, how long can this go on? And huge disruption. And even if it's not even, if it doesn't necessarily show up in some of the export and import numbers, I think there's also a lot of concern of what are we doing here, Canada? I think, we can have that whole discussion and get that rant going. But it's not good for us as a reliable export partner. I think that's another part of this discussion that has been the concern all along. Now, speaking of economic news and some of the impacts, Canada's economy kept growing in May, but early signs of a long-awaited slowdown started to appear in June, according to StatsCan. The federal agency said Friday that real gross domestic product was up 0.3% in May, with growth in services producing sectors offsetting declines in goods. Quote here from Desjardins Group, Royce Mendez says the sharp reversal in June reinforces our view that the Bank of Canada is done with rate hikes. Momentum is clearly slowing and the risks to the downside are growing. Okay, well, there you go. The Bank of Canada has said that future rate decisions, including its next one, September 6th, will be dependent on what economic data shows. This is one to follow. It's definitely, there's a lot of talk here about, there's about 6 to 9 months for these rate hikes to take effect. And it seems, at least at this point, if you do a litmus test with a lot of economists, we could be back into the pause territory, obviously something that we're following very closely here at Real Agriculture. Indian basmati rice exporters have been receiving early order requests amid concerns that India could apply a ban on basmati rice exports, like what was done earlier this month with non-basmati white rice exports, according to Reuters. This fear has risen due to 3% increase in prices over a month and damage to the crop due to late monsoon rains. Under ordinary circumstances, buyers sign contracts for monthly shipments. However, due to the current circumstances, some are requesting that shipments initially scheduled for September and October be delivered in August instead. Though India has never stopped basmati rice exports in the past, it did impose export taxes on the product back in 2008. I mentioned at the beginning of the show we had some China economic news. China is seeking to boost consumption to spur the faltering economy. Meanwhile, economists fear China may be heading for deflation. So much talk about inflation. Now we're concerned about deflation, even as the rest of the world worries about inflation. The Chinese economy grew just 0.8% in the second quarter compared with the previous 3 months, hurt by weak consumer spending, high youth unemployment, and a downturn in real estate. Goldman Sachs economists are saying to keep an eye on electricity prices. Okay, so here is something to definitely pay attention to. Those paid by consumers are starting to unwind what's been a 25% surge since 2019. The Goldman Sachs said late last week. Using a consumer price index measure, Goldman's team is projecting a 3% to 4% pullback in cumulative electricity prices by this fall. That's according to economist Spencer Hill, who wrote in a note for Goldman Sachs. Goldman even shaved its December CPI year-on-year inflation forecast to 2.9% from 3.1% as a result. Quote here from Mr. Hill, who said, "We estimate that the tailwind from cheaper electricity could offset as much as half of the consumption drag from the resumption of student loan repayments." Of course, the CPI data there, those are U.S. economic numbers. Yeah, so, and there's been some recent talk about fuel prices have lately been going up. There's talk here in the Golden Report, electricity prices going down. It's weird with the heat wave, and we haven't been hearing more about blackouts. You'd think with 6 weeks, whatever it's been in parts of the Southwest, 110 plus, that we would see more blackouts. We just have not necessarily heard a lot about that in the news. It's kind of weird. I thought we would. Alberta crop conditions. Now, I referenced the Saskatchewan crop report earlier when I was talking to Pete. Definitely going sideways. In Alberta, it just feels like it's been bad since the beginning. So maybe less disappointment here. Alberta crop conditions have declined just slightly from 2 weeks ago, with the early yield outlook not surprisingly below the 5-year average. A bi-weekly crop report Friday pegged the overall condition of all crops in the province at about 43% good to excellent as of Tuesday. That is down just a couple points from July 14th report, but in sharp contrast to 72% of last year and the 5 and 10-year averages of 60 and 64%. At just 29% good to excellent, crop conditions are the worst in the south region. I can vouch for that as I look at my window and I see that, followed by the central area at 36%, the northwest at 48%, the Peace at 56%, and the northeast at the top at 57%. So it's going to be interesting to see where these production numbers. We talked to John Dreger a couple weeks ago. We also had Ted Seifert last week. We were talking about this a little bit too. And it kind of confirmed that Saskatchewan crop report last week on Friday that I don't know. We still are in that middle of that band there between the 22 and 21, but there is more and more people trying to say that we're actually getting closer and closer to that 21 number by the day. Interesting story here. CNH coming to the realization that things are tightening on the farm. Okay. And so as a result of that, there's a quote here. Scott Wine, Chief Executive Officer of Farm and Construction Machinery at CNH, says, "We've been clear we have no intentions of decreasing prices, but we think limiting how much we increase, it is probably the right thing to do at this point. Already used inventory of crop cutting combines is increasing in markets like North America. In Ukraine, where CNH has a large market share, farm equipment sales have dropped by 50% this year. No kidding. Surprised it's not even more. So we may be seeing, if you look at some of the profitability of John Deere, CNH has been quite strong. Some of that has really been driven by increased prices because of the commodity crop cycle, pushing that on to farmers. Time may be where that is going to somehow slow down here. And like CNH says, I'm not sure it's going down, but how much higher can it go up? Hey, just one more note here. Buehler Industries, manufacturer of the Versatile and Farm King brands, has engaged the services of Toronto-based Origin Merchant Partners to identify a long-term investment partner. Through a series of initiatives, including the sale of unutilized assets earlier in the year, Buehler Industries has solidified its financial foundation by securing sufficient capital for current operational needs, but they're looking for a long-term partner, so something to follow there as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us all across all social media, or you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. And just like that, July is over. Tomorrow is August, baby, which means we move into harvest season, which will definitely be covered here at Real Agriculture. And the pennant races heat up. Go, Jays, go. Making some moves on the weekend. Things are looking pretty good. I'm looking forward to seeing Ryu start tomorrow in Baltimore, I believe. So we'll see how that goes as the Jays move to a 6-man rotation. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.